Welcome to this edition of Backstage Pass with Leah Chang. I'm your host, Leah Chang. The Roundabout Theatre Company's production of David Henry Hwang's Yellowface, starring Daniel Dae Kim as an Asian American playwright who protests yellowface casting in the blockbuster musical Miss Saigon, only to mistakenly cast a white actor as the Asian lead in his own play, has garnered 3 Tony nominations, including Best Revival of a Play, Best Actor in a Leading Role in a Play for Daniel Dae Kim, and Best Actor in a Featured Role in a Play for Francis Jue. Daniel Dae Kim has made history as the first AAPI nominee in the Lead Actor in a Play category.
Tony Award-winning playwright David Henry Hwang.
Somewhere out there, our star is waiting for us to find him.
We are looking to cast this role with an Asian.
As you should.
Does he look Asian to you?
I have to cast this in a way that feels right to me. And I can tell an Asian when I see one.
You're Asian, right?
Well, my ancestry is really mixed up.
Marcus is mixed race Asian.
Can you imagine if this got into the papers?
You know, it wouldn't be just me who'd get into trouble. It'd be you, too.
Good point. Yellowface. In this day and age, Asian parts must only ever be played by Asian actors. I didn't go through those protests and hunger strikes just so some white imposter could help himself to our hard-won opportunities.
But didn't you cast him?
I don't want to talk about it. You have to fight the power.
What power is it?
To put it bluntly, white America. Why do you do all this?
Because it feels good to be part of something bigger than myself.
You really want to help the community?
Yes, but
Then take off your mask. I'm willing to go out there and lose my face. How about you?
Daniel Dae Kim is on the Time 100 list as one of the 100 most influential people of 2025, and David and Daniel are on A100's list of 2025's most impactful Asian Pacific leaders. This episode includes my conversation with Tony nominee Francis Jue. I'll also take you inside the Dramatists Guild Gala, where Christine Toy Johnson presented David Henry Hwang with the Lifetime Achievement Award. His family, including his wife Kathryn Layng and son Noah, were on hand, in addition to his Yellowface family, director Leigh Silverman, Daniel, and Francis. Yellowface was taped in November for PBS's Great Performances, and the production will begin airing on May 16th. Yellowface has garnered Outstanding Revival of a Play nominations from the Drama League, Drama Desk, and Outer Critics Circle. Francis Jue has been nominated for an Outer Critics Circle Award for Featured Performer in a Broadway Play.
Well, first, I was really grateful to get the offer because it was not a guarantee. It was not something that I think I had any right to expect. When Leigh and David contacted me saying that the Roundabout was going to be making the announcement that it was going to be on their season and that Daniel Dae Kim was going to be playing DHH, but that they hadn't even had meetings yet to discuss budget or casting or anything like that. I let them know that I was really happy that the play was finally going to get done on Broadway and get a wider audience. I always thought that it deserved that. And that I really wanted to play HYH. I laid that card down. But I also said, but I totally understand, it's Broadway. And, you know, I know that there are pressures outside of whatever, and I'm 17 years older than when we first did it. And who knows, who knows why these decisions are made. These are totally out of an actor's control.
Right.
So, but I said, but I will do whatever you want me to do to prove to you that I want and can do this part. And Leigh said, hold tight, we haven't made any decisions yet. We haven't even talked about it, so I'll get back to you. And it was months later that I finally got contacted by Leigh. And I was, really ecstatic. She was gracious enough to say, we never talked about anybody else. We didn't make an offer to anybody else. We would love for you to play this part. So I'm just grateful that, 17 years after the first time, I'm still, capable of playing that role. I felt like I had 17 years of having worked with David and Leigh, where they really encouraged me to be braver than I am, to be smarter than I am, and to take myself more seriously. I think when I told Leigh this, when I first played the role, I was very concerned about landing all of the humor. And I was concerned about playing somebody who was older than I am. And this time around, I just wanted to represent an immigrant. And I just wanted for people to understand him and to take him seriously, in contrast to before, where I knew that part of his function was the humor originally. This time around, I was really focused on that radical faith that immigrants have in the American dream.
Right.
And that we can be very cynical about now, those of us who were born here, and because we take it for granted. But so many immigrants don't. They really believe in the ideals of this country and of humanity, of our ability to evolve. And they take it on faith because that's what they're trying to do with their lives and for their families.
Right.
So this time around, I really was much calmer. I had more a sense of what I thought that the play was about than the first time. And I was grateful that audiences were understanding the play the way that I think I understand it, in a way that they didn't back in 2007, 2008.
Wrap a finger. I mean, they were just took your bags and went with you. In each of your hills and valleys, to the point where when you go into the hospital, when you die, when you are under investigation, they were, and that, quite honestly, you got the biggest applause at Curtain Call. And I remember, well, I saw you afterwards, but I called you and I said, Francis, did you see who your audience is? And you told me you can't see over the lights. And when I told you what your audience was, but then I talked to you about the journey, you said to me, I really wish that David had seen this show with this particular audience, with their particular response. What did that mean to you? You know, what did that mean to you?
I think we've all experienced student matinees that were horrifying, where they just don't get it, they don't like it, they don't have any experience of what the play is about. And this play, much of the play, takes place before many of these kids in the house were even born.
Right.
And, had they even heard of the Miss Saigon controversy, had they heard of Donorgate?
And did they care?
And yeah. And so I went in to that performance thinking, okay, be ready, because they may just not care. Roundabout does a really great job of getting kids to the theater, involving them in the story.
Student planning things.
Preparation to see the show. They hadn't told them everything about the play, but I think that they had helped them learn a little bit about what was talked about in the show beforehand. Right. But still, you never know. But from the very beginning, you could tell
feel it.
that it wasn't just celebrity. It wasn't just that they were out of the classroom. They were involved in this story because kids have parents. And because kids these days are so attached to so many events going on in the world,
Right.
whether they're the specific ones in the show or not, through social media. And so they know corruption when they see it. And they see when people are lying. And they are involved in identity politics, whether they want to or not, in school, in their families, in their own lives. And so when I heard them sort of attaching themselves to HYH's optimism and his and recognizing his parenting and or yes, and then really being shocked by the country's treatment of him, and then being horrified by his illness and his death.
Right.
I was so moved, and it affirmed for me what I thought that the play is about.
Right.
And I wished that David had been there, because as much as David wrote in Yellowface a tribute to his dad, and his dad's aspirations and his dad's own faith in the American dream. And I've also been lucky enough to work with other playwrights that I feel like I just get, that speak from the truth that I know.
Right.
Like Mike Liu, like Lauren Yee. And I am so grateful that I got to grow up
I really
working with them.
I really feel, because every time I turned around, you were at another regional theater doing another Asian American playwright's work. That you're probably one of the few has really gone through many of their work.
I wish there were
More
opportunities to do with more of them. Yeah, whenever I turn around and another Asian American playwright is getting produced, I'm like, why aren't they there? Why wasn't I hired for that? Or my understanding of what it means to be an actor is to discover what I have in common with the characters that I play. And that's not to mean that I bring all of the characters to me and my qualities and stuff like that, but to see how much I might have made the same choices that character did under the circumstances in that time period,
Right.
With that background. And one of the most exciting things, I think, for me about Cambodian Rock Band was to discover how much I had in common with this real-life mass-murdering war criminal who took great pride in how efficiently and how
chilling.
How well he did his job for the Khmer Rouge. And I think we can all convince ourselves of anything, including what he did, which is what makes theater so exciting.
Right.
We get to sit in a room and choose which characters we identify with, and learn how to take sides, learn how to debate that. And in playing Doik, I thought my job was not just to be believably that evil, but also believably that mundane, that ordinary.
Right.
And to show people that he wasn't somebody who I wanted to excuse, but somebody that people could understand that they were only this far away
Right.
from making the same choices as he did.
Where you played David, DHH,
Oh.
in Soft Power, and what it was like to develop that, especially given the subject matter.
Well, David is such a great collaborator, and so I never felt nervous about playing him. I remember asking him, why did you put yourself in this play? Why are you here? And why is this character here in this play?
Interesting.
Because he's not in the sort of reverse King and I story.
Right.
And yes, I get stabbed several times. And we talk a lot about the country and what it means to be Asian in this country. But why did you put yourself in here? And I think with the new version that they did at the Signature in DC just this last year, they're getting closer to answering some of those questions. I think that he has said that he writes from the subconscious,
Right.
and that he learned that from really wonderful mentors, and just sort of allows characters to speak. And so there's a part of me that felt like that was his role. He's a bit of a stenographer in a way, with the exception of this one major incident where he gets stabbed, which keeps interfering with his sort of remove, his kind of objectivity.
I see. Okay.
And he's forced then to take a stand himself, to be involved. As you said, he has such a great sense of humor, and he's very self-effacing in many, many ways, and he was making jokes about it all the time. And even when dealing with very serious subjects, he loves to force us to be a little off balance, to look at things in a different way,
Right.
with humor.
Right.
And so, yeah, I was in the room when Leigh and when Janine would say to him, "David, put your gallbladder on the table. What are we writing this for?" And he has said publicly, they kind of made him take himself a little bit more seriously with that project. It was great to return to Yellowface in that respect, because in that play, because it was so much about his relationship with his father,
Right.
he had to take some of it very seriously, and his relationship to his father and his father's American dream seriously, because it really happened.
And I have to acknowledge that my dad, looking down from wherever he is, I think he was really thrilled to be the fan favorite in a Broadway hit, the wonderful Francis Jue. Excited to be the fan favorite on national television. Lights, cameras, great performance.
I never met his dad. I never heard a recording of his dad. I only ever saw a picture of his dad the weekend before we started rehearsals
Right.
for the Broadway production,
Right.
because his sister Grace showed me a photo on her phone.
Okay.
It was a photo of David's parents at church, both in full-length furs.
Oh, well,
Just
there you go.
looking grand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the advice, the only major advice that David gave me about his father was that he stood tall, and that when he entered a room, he was the star of that room. It's never been as good as it is now. to be an Asian in this business.
Even right now, specifically right now, on the Broadway stages where there are Asian Americans on the marquee, in photos on the front of the house.
I'm a huge fan of Maybe Happy Ending. And I love it so much. And I think that it's doing a great job of representing without saying, representing with flags.
Right.
And, I think it is, although it's about robots, it is just a great example of
Humanity
the
on
universal
stage.
humanity on stage. And Asians just haven't had that moment yet in the American theater, where there's been a cultural moment where everyone just acknowledged our humanity. And so, as much as I am proud to have been part of this season and to have had, how many years of working, both non-traditionally and in Asian roles, I just keep looking at the future. And I don't see anything coming in the spring where there are Asians being featured, except for Old Friends, which I saw in London, and Lea Salonga is fabulous in it, so everyone go see it.
David Henry Hwang. Has been thrilling us with his award-winning literary masterpieces for decades. His plays and musicals, screenplays, television shows, opera, libretti have entertained us, enlightened us, moved us, and taught us about ourselves. And his unflagging generosity, as seen through his mentorship, his years of service to the Dramatists Guild and the American Theatre Wing, and in public and private moments of encouragement to the current and next generation of writers, has ripples that continue to impact and expand our community of truth tellers. And he has done all this while being a beacon of hope for what's possible to Asian American theater artists. He's given us characters that we can see and or play that are human beings that share the heritage of our ancestors, absent the stereotypes that have so long been accepted as the status quo. What else is possible, we think? How else can we be seen? And we watch David write truth to power as his protagonists boldly and unapologetically express what it's like to be a person who looks like us living in America today, when so often we are shown that our experiences are, at best, inconsequential, thereby opening the door for the rest of us to be able to do the same. Thank you, David, for writing your stories, all our stories, into the narrative of the American landscape of storytelling, and showing us that so much is possible. You inspire us, you teach us, you lift us up. Your legacy honors all of us, and we are so thrilled to honor you with this year's Lifetime Achievement Award. Congratulations.
Wow, thank you, Christine, and thanks to the awards committee. At a moment like this, I can't help but reflect on my beginnings, which also involve a Joe Papp story, and something that Joe made a couple predictions for me when we first started working together. One, he said, well, I think you will survive in this field because you can write comedy. And then he also said, I think you'll get better looking when you get older. So I want to thank my ACTL family, my wife Kathryn, my son Noah, our daughter Eva, and also our Yellowface family that's here tonight. Thank you, Daniel Dae Kim, Francis Jue, my longtime collaborator, Leigh Silverman. And thanks to the Dramatists Guild for choosing to honor a playwright whose career really is deeply embedded with two of the terms that have been fallen into disrepute in certain circles recently, DEI and woke. And I was 10 years old when I got to see my mom as rehearsal pianist for a new theater company in Los Angeles called East West Players. It was a first attempt to try to give equal opportunity artistically and career-wise to Asian Americans. And then my first play was produced by Joe Papp because the public had produced a show in which a Caucasian actor was cast in an Asian role, and this led to the first yellowface protests in New York theater history. Joe, being who he was, hired one of the protesters onto his staff, and it was about that time that my college dorm play came across their desk called FOB. So I was the beneficiary of an affirmative action program because affirmative action identifies a social need and then creates a program to deal with it. The door was opened and I was the person who got to walk through that door. When I first entered this field, if you were going to write something about Asians, number one, overwhelmingly, you had to figure out how to put a white guy in the middle of the story. And number two, overwhelmingly, you were most likely writing stories in which Asian actors were playing foreigners that were set overseas. And fortunately, the landscape has changed in many ways, but that for me exemplifies both the power and the beauty of woke thinking. And particularly in this moment, we're writers. I think we need to reclaim those terms. It is a moment to create a new counterculture in this really difficult and terrifying environment that we find ourselves in. And that counterculture can make woke cool again. Because woke is telling our stories. Woke means telling the truth. Woke means putting stories on stage that actually people want to see and that will bring new audiences into the theater. And being artists, being writers is so important at this moment in particular. And if we ever have doubt, we can just look to how much what we do pisses them off. And they're pissed off because they're afraid of what we can do and the power of the written word and what we are able to put on stage. So thank you again to the Dramatists Guild for affirming a writer whose life and career exemplifies the fact that DEI means diversity, excellence, and inclusion, because you can't have excellence without diversity and inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for this edition of Backstage Pass with Leah Chang. Until next time.